So we're back at KEXU 96.1 FM, Pole People's Revolutionary Radio. I'm JV and my co-host here with me, Karena Akri Paez. Welcome back to Free Aztlan.
Thank you, Joey.
Absolutely. And so we're going to be doing this show today on YouTube. As most heard, Port Magazine is taking a spring break. And so, we're going to do it on YouTube. So that's fine. And we have a few things for you. We have a press release from our sister, the elder Sandra Holguin. We're also going to do an update on immigration, right? And we're also going to discuss a portion of the book, Chicano Power and the Struggle for Aztlan, a very important, timely section of the book that we are gonna, discuss, and it's gonna be a good show. And so, so how do you like the show so far, Karina?
Well, I love the show. I'm so happy to be part of it, and I love the kind of the format that we're adopting now. So what I'm referring to is that we thought, one thing that we could bring the audience was a portion of the show being like a political discussion, study kind of segment of the show, and then we would, ease into an interview or something that would provide a material example of the thing that we talked about. And so we hope the audience has been enjoying that for the past couple of weeks. And if you have any suggestions for us, please feel free to leave a comment or let us know what you like about it.
Absolutely. And we welcome all of the comments as well. So we're just going to start this show with the press release. And so this is on, as some of you know, our sister, Sandra Holguin. We had her on last week, and we interviewed her. It was a very horrific story that she had to tell, that she, shared with us. And this is something that it's horrible that this sister went through it. And after the show, countless people contacted us, just, expressing things that they've gone through. And it's horrible because danza is a place that most people go to. They look for kind of like a sanctuary, a place where, they can go and get that ceremony and that medicine. Unfortunately, in the case of Sister Sandra, she didn't get medicine. She got, it wasn't medicine. It was kind of poison. It's horrible. What she went through is a horrible ordeal. And I'm just going to read the press release from Aztlan Press. And it says, Aztlan Press update on elder abuse. And San Jose, Califa Aztlan. Aztlan Press is pleased to provide a favorable update regarding the court hearing for Sister Sandra Holguin, who was assaulted at an ensayo at an Aztec dance group in San Jose, Califa Aztlan. On March 22nd, 2022, Radio Free Aztlan, KEXU 96.1 FM, interviewed Sandra Holguin on her devastating experience with horizontal crime and abuse in the danza community. The interview is also available at Free Aztlan's channel on YouTube. The interview received much public support for Sandra. And, a certain group, there's many different people who have come forward to discuss the many forms of mistreatment that they have received by a certain group. And there's also a financial situation, questions of misappropriation and many different things of funds and other stuff as well, that many people have alleged. And so, going back to Sister Sandra Holguin, a 58-year-old member of a certain Aztec dancer group, recounted how she was led outside by another member who was in her 30s. And two members were in their 30s, were waiting to assault Sandra over a disagreement between their respective husbands. Sandra Holguin was struck in her face and retaliated with self-defense. She defended herself. As Sandra was healing from her fifth, and I repeat, fifth neck surgery, these people that attacked Sandra knew that she had 18 bolts in her neck and was recovering from recent surgery. And again, dogs. Then they called police, called the pigs, and accused Sandra of being the aggressor. Sandra's face was injured and her attacker had a mark on the forehead as a result of Sandra defending herself during the attack. As a result, Sandra was required to appear in court on March 24th, 2022. Aztlan Press is pleased to report that the court also did not see merit in the false accusations by the aggressor of this group. In fact, the court wishes to drop the charges after 4 months, provided that Sandra and the aggressor stay away from each other and Sandra continues her program of medical care. Aztlan Press is grateful for this victory on behalf of the people. Aztlan Press does not give credibility to the KKK courts of the United Snakes and found it concerning that an organization that claims to be a spiritual resource for the people would lend judicial credibility to the settler state police pigs. Aztlan Press will continue to report on the corrupt practices in danza groups as we continue to receive more reports from victims of their destructive and predatory practices. And so this is, this is the press release that was released for Sister Sandra. Incredible that this could happen to someone who's undergone surgery, neck surgery. It's incredible that this would happen. And so this is something that we're going to be following closely. This is something that, Aztlan Press fully supports. And we'll continue to update you as well on the developments in this. And Karena, so you had an update on immigration and stuff? Absolutely.
Yes, I do. So we wanted to provide a bit of an immigration update because we're looking at, a lot of headlines about people presenting themselves in Class A port of entries to come into the United States seeking asylum, seeking refuge. And it's once again highlighting the discrepancy in how white European people are treated in the immigration process and how non-white European people are treated in the process. And so what we're seeing a lot in the news right now is a reference to Title 42. So I wanted to explain briefly what Title 42 is and how it came back into use during the Trump administration and what the usage of Title 42 looks like right now during the Biden administration. So Title 42 was a law that was created in 1944, and it was very rarely used. It's a method, it's a legal way to exclude people in cases of, public health safety. And it was a rarely used regulation. However, in 2020, the Trump administration brought it back into practice, and it was used to remove people quickly from the border. So because of COVID, that was the pretext, right, to remove people quickly. So once Title 42 comes back into use under the Trump administration, its use is expanded to those who are already in the United States. So we see the application of Title 42 as a way to also expedite the removal of people who have been admitted to the United States to seek asylum. So we're looking at, what we saw essentially in Trump's administration was the renaissance of Title 42, with the reasoning being the COVID epidemic. And then concurrently, we saw Title 42 used for rapid mass deportations of people who had been admitted already for asylum, right? So when Title 42 is used for rapid mass deportation, as it has been now continuing into the Biden administration, what that means is that people are not allowed due process. And due process when you're seeking asylum is something that is guaranteed by both international treaty law and U.S. federal code. So there are two standards of law, the international one as well as the domestic one, where the right to apply for asylum is codified into law that the United States is supposedly obligated to follow. So we see in the Biden administration now what is happening with Title 42. It's being highlighted because a certain group of people are being allowed even humanitarian parole now. So you see articles coming out about how there have been agreements made to let Ukrainians in, and how Russians have had a much harder time. Well, from Aztlan's perspective, we're seeing two groups of white people be admitted. One group took slightly longer time to be admitted, and the other group was admitted expeditiously. So, what does that mean for Aztlan? Well, it just reinforces the gross misapplication of what U.S. federal code and international treaty law looks like when it is being executed by a white supremacist empire. So that is what it looks like, actually, and that is what it means for Aztlan. It's a more gross demonstration of how we will never have a way to seek liberation or fair treatment in any kind of settler courts or application of settler law to Aztlan, because we know that nothing will ever change until we control the land. So
yeah, and land is key. And so the courts, the KKK courts, are actually a part of the state, right? They're the state apparatus. Mm-hmm. And so, and I remember hearing about, people even in the concentration camps who would attempt to utilize the law in order to, seek some kind of victories and release or what have you. And it's very discouraging. It's very demoralizing for people to get into the law within the concentration camps, because once they, there's a million loopholes. There's so many loopholes. There's so many loopholes that the KKK courts use, where even if you prove that there's been misconduct in a trial or what have you, there's also something called harmless error. And I found that out. I was navigating the court, and I thought, I can find a remedy through the KKK courts. And I actually did find gross, prosecutorial misconduct in the case that I was attempting to overturn. And even though it was there that there was misconduct and I had proof of it, and the judge even issued an order on it saying that, yeah, this is, you can't do this. The courts simply stated, given all the other facts, this is called harmless error. And I was like, harmless error? So they can violate certain laws that would normally get a case overturned and get a new trial. But all a judge has to say is, yes, that was wrongdoing. Yes, this was misconduct. However, it was harmless error. And there's nothing you can do. So again, it's like there's a million loopholes. And it's very sad that some would rely strictly on the courts, um, and especially through the legal system in order to obtain liberation for Aztlan, because that's simply it's fantasy, right?
Right.
It's just never going to happen. But and that's why there's a need to raise consciousness, mobilize the people, and prepare to seize power. 3 steps. Not voting your way out of oppression, and not begging the Democrats to save us,
Right.
and it's absolutely.
And so reading your history and political theory is important so that we go in a straight line in that goal. We don't go all around
or in circles.
in circles, right?
So, and we also want to read from the sister today, the sister Desiree Rojas.
Oh,
we want to
yes.
read a very important statement that she made, and this is the land acknowledgement, right?
Yeah, I'll have to pull up on that.
Absolutely. And we're going to read the land acknowledgement from the sister. And it's very important because land, as Karina said, land is key. Land is very important in any struggle, especially for national liberation. There's never going to be, a true revolution that does not revolve around land. Land is, without the land, people can't control, their future or have self-determination. You have to have land. So land is key. And Sister Desiree, she wrote a beautiful land acknowledgement, because we do here at Free Aztlan, we do believe in land acknowledgement. Very important, whether we have an action, we have any kind of event. We want to, we want to be sure that we do make land acknowledgement. Very important.
You want to read it?
Absolutely. You could read this one.
Okay. All right. So again, this is by Desiree Rojas, and this has been shared previously with many of our relatives in a kind of a collective setting from many nations. So she writes, as we enter this space, let us be mindful of the native peoples of the American continent, especially during this time when millions of families sit around their table to enjoy a turkey in honor of the native people's empathy toward the English immigrants / colonists who were starving to death and dying from freezing winters of the northeastern climate, saved by the Wampanoag people, ending with a feast we know today as Thanksgiving. Let us be mindful that we have not forgotten the history of the betrayal and genocide of the native peoples of the North, Central, and South American continent. Let us be mindful that we stand on Aztlan. We stand on original native peoples' lands from Wampanoag, Inuit, Lakota, Blackfoot, Pueblo, Chichimeca, Triqui, Tonga, Miwok, Apache, Tule, Mayan, to the tribes of Peru, Brazil, and Argentina. Most importantly, let us be mindful that the freedom of Leonard Peltier is now going on over 46 years being imprisoned has everything to do with all of us, our freedom and liberty, especially when the previous presidents granted clemency by the thousands, all whom overlooked Leonard Peltier. Presidents Clinton, George Bush Jr., Obama, and Trump granted a total of 2,823 cases to murderers, drug sellers, federal tax evaders, bank robbers, and even war criminals, but not Leonard Peltier. Let us be mindful that it is time to free Leonard Peltier now. Let us be mindful that the original people's struggles and genocide continues. Over 70,000 farm workers of Triqui Nation live and work in San Quintin, Baja California, Mexico, whose harvest the Driscoll and Andrew Williamson's berries for a daily wage equivalent to the cost of the plastic box. for Driscoll berries after enduring forced migration due to the foreign policies like NAFTA, today's USMCA, and CAFTA that create poverty among indigenous native peoples of Mexico. Be mindful that tribes today in our nation continue without water, decent housing, healthcare, and services to protect Native women, trans women, and people from going missing and murdered. We are still on the front line shutting down corporate oil lines, defending our Mother Earth when with the Water is Life movement, educating anyone that cares about MMIWP, and resisting. Be mindful that the American continent, its original people, are still here because we are the survivors, children of genocides, colonization, and land grabs that removed, forced migrated our people then and now off our lands onto reservations, pueblos, rancherias, like today's NAFTA USMCA. Be mindful that we still exist, that we stand on our lands, and we walk with you today for justice, democracy, liberty, and freedom. Omoteo.
Oh, Mateo. So that was a beautiful document written by our sister Desiree Rojas. As usual, she just brought it.
She did.
Yeah, she did. She really did. But we're going to read a portion of the book, Chicano Power and the Struggle for Aztlan. You all know the book. This is here it is right here. So, this book, it's very important, groundbreaking book, political theory for Aztlan. And it's very, it's timely. And some of these pieces within the book were written, the portion that I'm going to read was written in 2012, before the, the person that it's, the Chicano assimilationist, Castro, Julian, before he even ran, it was already, it was written here and predicted that this person's going to be running. This is going to be the next Chicano, token Chicano, for, U.S. imperialism. And it turned out to be true. He was. But this was written in 2012. And I'll just read it. And it says, and this is, it's very important because Chicano people are often corralled into the, the false hope of the Democratic Party. And, many Chicano people see it as, well, this is better than the Republicans. And, it's the better poison, pick your poison. It's the better poison. And we don't believe that. We believe that, the Democrats are not going to save us. And they're part of the system. They're part of the, of state repression. They're an arm of state repression. And by us, partaking in the Democratic Party, hoopla, that what happens is we legitimize the system in the eyes of the Chicano nation. We legitimize the system in the eyes of our people. And we're not here to do that. There's plenty of Democrats who will do that already.
Yeah.
Brown Democrats, brown capitalists, and so we feel like people that, tout the label of revolutionary or anything in that realm should not participate in enemy politics, should not participate in state, in the state apparatus and legitimize this illegal, process that they call politics, bourgeois politics within U.S., these false U.S. borders. But let me get to this article. And it's called Democratic Convention Highlights Chicano Assimilationist.
And again, if you have your red book, if you have your Chicano red book, it's page 150. Okay.
It is page 150. Absolutely. So, okay, 150. And it says, on 4 September 2012, the Democratic National Convention was held in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was broadcast on almost every TV in this facility. Like the Republican National Convention, the Democrats had speakers come out to make a short speech on why you should vote for their candidate. These conventions are a classic, quote unquote, good cop, bad cop game meant to hoodwink the oppressed. This year's Democratic keynote speaker at the convention was Julian Castro, the mayor of San Antonio, Texas. Castro is running for Congress and is seen as an up and coming Democrat. Although he merely adds to the rest of the numerous defenders of imperialism, what is different and thus dangerous about Castro is that he is a Chicano bourgeois politician. He is now being propped up to fool the brown masses, just as Obama was used against the new African masses. Castro's background is similar to many Chicanos today. His grandmother migrated to the United Snakes in 1920 in the first wave of migration after the Mexican Revolution. His mother was born in Texas and was actively a part of the Chicano movement of the 1960s and 70s. As a first-generation college student, she joined the Raza Unida Party at RUP and became one of its leaders. As mentioned in part one, RUP came about from the leadership of Crusade for Justice, another important Chicano organization of that time. RUP meant to uplift La Raza's consciousness, take community control of social services in the barrios, and take control of schools and development, buildings, homes, parks, etc. This all seems quote unquote progressive, but without completely breaking with the oppressor's politics, these efforts were simply like trying to ride a bike with no chain. You can turn the pedals all you want, but the bike stays in the same spot. RUP naively thought America would stand by and allow an historically oppressed people, an internal semi-colony at that, to build a political party in the barrios, even though it attempted to do so within America's political system. The state would not allow this, as organizing the oppressed for any progressive political party activity poses a real potential threat to America's hegemony. Once organized and educated, this force can easily make a leap from working within the current system to working against the system. This is why people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were assassinated, even though they were not calling for socialism and pretty much working within the confines of the American laws. They still had influence and the potential was too much. RUP was heavily surveilled by the CIA and all the typical COINTELPRO tactics. And we'll get into COINTELPRO more in a minute. So COINTELPRO tactics were used to destroy this party. Fault also lies with the more revolutionary elements within RUP for not steering RUP on a path to seek liberation of the Chicano nation by building for a socialist revolution on these shores. So this is where Julian Castro comes from. And thus bourgeois nationalism is what shaped his ideas and led him down the road to brown capitalism. He is an outright defender of imperialism. Castro's assimilationist stance shone forth in his speech with statements like, quote, "We need to do our part as one community, as one United States of America," end quote. This is typical language of a comprador whose job is to bring the other oppressed into the fold of the oppressor. His job is always to smother the burning embers of resistance in a people and keep conditions as they currently are. The slave of old who lived in the Mazza's house would go out to the slave shacks and talk about how good Mazza is, how good the slaves got it, maybe even give them a piece of bacon or the good meat with a promise for more so long as they hang on and be content or say some prayers. This is the approach Castro took in his speech. His focus, like the rest of the Democrats, was on the quote-unquote middle class. At one point, his petty bourgeois colors intensified as he yelled, quote, "The middle class, the engine of our economic growth, end quote. The brown bourgeoisie must have soiled themselves in excitement at hearing this parasite babble on. Castro's interests are stripped of the more progressive aspects of the 1970s political line of his mother, Rosie Castro, which he branded as outdated in an interview on Pacifica Radio. As misguided as RUP may have been in their approach, they never spoke of leaving Raza behind, nor were they reduced to telling Raza to, quote, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, end quote. Rather, they sought to include even the poorest Raza living in the shacks in their reforms and fought to better their conditions. On the other hand, Julian Castro has aligned with imperialism. As he stated, quote, we know in our free market economy, some people will prosper more than others, end quote. The assumption that there will always be the haves and the have-nots is not something we can accept. But Castro sends the message to the ruling class that he is okay with this and thus is not intending to threaten or challenge the status quo. This buys his seat in the imperialist shuttle of American politics. The use of Julian Castro is just the latest attempt to get Chicanas and Chicanos and other raza to feel as if they are part of America. But many raza still remember the oppression we have faced. It is still too much for many to side with the enemy. According to the 2010 U.S. Census, about 2.3 million businesses are owned by raza. Yet when it comes to voting in bourgeois elections, only 60% of adult raza citizens vote, compared to 70% of new African adults and 74% of whites. At the same time, approximately 500,000 Raza youth will turn 18 and join the quote-unquote Hispanic voting bloc every year for the next 20 years. Castro is the tip of the iceberg where America will begin courting Raza much more than they ever have in history. They are especially recruiting Raza with family history of activism such as Julian Castro and his mother. This is an attempt to legitimize them in the eyes of the Chicano nation. But these brown faces in high places will never be legitimate so long as they support the world's most despicable parasites. Those who we see as legitimate are those working to liberate our nation, those working to neutralize the imperialists. We see America's open repression reaching fascist proportions in Aztlan, especially in prisons and on the U.S. fabricated border. Most recently, we saw along the Texas-Mexico border the U.S. installation of a quote-unquote mini Navy, where speedboats with high-powered weapons are guarding the Rio Bravo. These boats were recently baptized in Mexicano blood when they shot and killed a Mexican citizen on the Mexican side who was barbecuing in a picnic area with his family right on the river. Footage on the American corporate media this week shows the Border Patrol speed off while cries from family and children erupt in the park. This open war on raza comes without a peep from bourgeois politicians like Julian Castro, who, rather than condemn this repression in his speech, instead declares, quote unquote, America will prevail, with a wink to Maza. We must also learn from the lessons of the past. We are not free to create our own political parties that struggle for our nations. Look at what happened to the RUP and Panthers and others. Although parties of the internal semi-colonies are not publicly banned in America, they are certainly banned behind closed doors in Langley, in Washington, D.C., and their other hideaways. We know this is true when we learn about COINTELPRO and other operations to infiltrate and disrupt people's parties or groups. And so we refuse to be fed snake oil from the imperialists or their allies. We work to hasten the day when Aztlan and the other internal semi-colonies can be liberated from attacks by America. And that was that was a beautiful piece, and it was inspired by Julian Castro.
I know he's your favorite favorite politician. For the audience who didn't know, Joey has a particularly despises Julian Castro and his brother too, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean,
and his mama too. Not
well, now she's straight off the path of revolutionary nationalism, and she is just right there supporting the imperialists, and on camera and corporate media. But this piece right here was very it was inspired by, of course, seeing Julian Castro, but today we could see other people, and they spoke a little bit about COINTELPRO.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about this, because we all know people in the community, we know people in the community who, their political line is shut out. Their political line, on the one hand, they're supporting Democrats. On the other hand, they want to be involved in, anything that Chicano people organize. And this wishy-washy kind of, it's kind of like they're a mixed bag. And then they go on attacking people who do good work in the community, revolutionary people. Many of these people just want attention. They just want, a spotlight on them. And so, we refuse to even acknowledge some of these attacks. It's so funny. These people is just, especially the Democrats, the Democrat supporters, it's really, really something to see them trying to attack revolutionary folks, revolutionary raza that, it's something else. And but COINTELPRO taught us that, anybody can research COINTELPRO and see some of these people that you never see them attacking white supremacy, but they are really quick to attack people doing revolutionary work, and why is that? I don't know if they're agents outright or they're just, agent provocateurs, or as Sister Desiree said, they're just bored as hell and have nothing to do. They have nothing to do. I don't know. Maybe they have empty nest syndrome, and they just, they're retired and they just, they have nothing else to do. And so they're attacking revolutionary folks, I don't know. They might need a personal life. I don't understand why they do that, but it's just so funny to me that, some of these characters, just too much, but we wanted to, and what's your thoughts on COINTELPRO and this type of behavior?
Well, there's certain strategies I think that we know about that are typically employed. Like, for example, it's a similar strategy that you'll read about from like these alphabet soup organizations, right? And so one of them is when they try to infiltrate an organization or get information, they won't send a stranger that you've never seen before, right? They will use somebody, I won't say send, but I'll just say use, because I don't know what the nature of the agreement is, but they will use someone who you know of, so that you have like known about them, like they were involved in the, this progressive presidential campaign, or like
they held a megaphone in front of somebody's house, or
they hold megaphones a lot. That's really revolutionary. They do the hold megaphones, and what else? But so they use people that are like, not complete strangers to you, like you may know of them or something, because so then that way obviously you'll have some kind of confidence and allow them in, and then they will try to get information that they will completely then distort. And like they'll tell one truth to get like 5 lies through, type of strategy. So that is something very common that we see in the alphabet soup agencies. It's not something that we haven't seen before. It's as the more time you spend in the movement, I guess, the more often you see the very same patterns, right, Joey? What patterns would you say?
Oh man, where do I start at? I mean, I've seen patterns of people attacking revolutionary people, utilizing the courts, filing lawsuits against revolutionary folks,
calling the police,
calling the pigs,
calling the police.
Calling the pigs. How more reactionary can somebody be than to call the pigs on somebody else in the community? How more reactionary can you get? Like, and so these kinds of peoples, I don't know how they are able to sit in any space pertaining to the Chicano movement today if they called the pigs and they did this in order to, filing lawsuits on, revolutionary folks because you have a disagreement or whatever. Like, these people are it's just incredible that they're allowed. And it makes me wonder, why are they allowed into these circles? They must be doing something. And they must be, I don't know what they're doing, but they must be doing something very good to the right person to be allowed in these spaces, because how can you let somebody who's calling the pigs, filing lawsuits on people in the movement, and they're being allowed in these spaces? Like, what is this about? You know? And
then you find out that the people who are organizing events are actually kind of their like PR people, like, so they'll get invited, like there'll be a very odd addition to some kind of panel or something
goodness.
With like with other like names of people that you would expect to see on a panel of some kind, and then they have this like last minute addition of like somebody, and it's like, but it's someone who's got a direct tie to the organizer. And then you start connecting the dots. Like we've discussed, you can make a diagram of these we keep track of this. We keep track of all of this.
You got to have your intel, and that's very important. Intel is key. And so, this is a lot of this activity that we've seen that is just, incredible. And some of it's funny, some of it's like shocking. Like, what are we going to do about this? And we got to find a remedy for this as well. And, that's a long-term goal, is to begin to deal with stuff like that in different ways. And that's very important. But yeah, so going back to the immigration, the so-called immigration situation, I don't like using that term immigration. I would rather use migration, absolutely. But in this, now, especially with this administration, this other illegal, occupying force that's in so-called office. What are some of the things that, are they scaling back? Is there more deportations than the last oppressor, or
it's about the same?
Wow.
Yeah, it's about the same. And what has, in the number of people who, as of January, I won't say as of March because the last data I saw was from January 2020, we had about over 25,000 migrants incarcerated. And so these are for-profit concentration camps that, for example, people make an erroneous assumption that you can separate administrations in terms of how the migration situation is handled. And that's really not the case, because what we see when we look from Democratic administration to Republican administration to Democratic administration and so forth, we see that, first of all, when Republicans are in office, they pass all kinds of horrible policies for migration. for example, ICE was formed under George W. Bush as a relatively small organization. When Obama came into office, ICE grew by 3,600%. So it became the most massive deportation and concentration camp for migrants system that this illegitimate settler nation has ever had. So, and then after, I wrote an article once, and I should revive it, but it was called the deportation machine that Obama and Biden built for Donald Trump. And so it outlines
the growth.
Yeah, I'll let you read that. So it kind of outlines the growth of ICE and reinforces really what we talk about often in terms of this political scam in the United States. And what I'm referring to is this idea that, okay, when Republicans are in office, they pass all these horrible policies, and people, agree that Republicans are really bad. And then Democrats come in, and instead of reversing those policies, what they do is further expand upon them and therefore normalize these policies. And so that's exactly what we've seen between the growth of ICE and the severity of immigration policies affecting our relatives, because let's face it, most of these people who are seeking asylum are people who are indigenous to Turtle Island. They are people who have the inherent right to travel up and down this continent, as we have for millennia. And so to clarify, I'll say that again. These people who are seeking asylum are actually on their homelands, and they have the right to love, to trade, and to travel across our traditional trade routes, as we have been doing for millennia, and we will continue to do so. So, there is that, irony once again. That is another reason that we have to have a clear path forward when we're talking about national liberation, because it's a waste of time to be organizing for petitions to change the mind of Joe Biden. Why? Because Joe Biden is just a figurehead for the white supremacist empire. The priorities, the objectives, and the policies of that empire will never change.
Yeah.
Whether a Democrat or a Republican is in office. And so what Biden has done, which has never been done before, and this didn't get a lot of press, and I think we should, reemphasize this as on social media, because of course that is how most people are getting a lot of their news lately, is that 1 month ago, the Biden administration appeared before the Supreme Court to argue for the indefinite detention of migrants.
Yeah, remember that.
And if I hate to say it, but if Donald Trump had done that, the Democrats would have been sending you a lot of links to donate to the campaign to make sure that a Republican gets out of office. And so here we have a Democrat that is arguing in front of the Supreme Court for the indefinite detention of migrants. Now, these migrants are people that have run from countries including the most violent places on earth. As I said, many of them are coming from countries they could be coming from, rural narco-dominated areas in Mexico that are extremely dangerous. They could be seeking asylum from Honduras, from Guatemala, and, many different countries. But the common underlying factor that these places have become uninhabitable and extremely dangerous is because of the economic and political terror that has been unleashed by the United States on these countries. And so it is like, it was like burning down your neighbor's house and then not offering them refuge. That's kind of what it is looking like.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's good news for us to know about. It's wonderful things that we need to understand, the horrific characteristics of the United States, and and how our colonialism, how our occupation is translated today, because it's different. Times change, and oppression changes with the times, and the oppression that we face may be in many ways the same as decades before. but in many ways it's also different, and it's new, it's revamped. And so we have to understand, like, all of these quote unquote immigration laws and different things that they do. The fact that a Democrat and a Republican can have roughly the same amount of deportations, what more proof do we need? Like, they're committing the same attacks on brown people. So, we can't be fooled by their snake oil no more. We've been fooled for generations. We owe it to our ancestors, to, learn from what they suffered, learn from what our grandparents and their grandparents suffered under this occupation. And I'd just like to thank once again Sister Desiree Rojas, Chingona, for writing that piece, that badass piece on land recognition, and including Aztlan right at the top. I love that she did that, and it's a beautiful thing. We're going to continue to promote that for many years to come on Free Aztlan. We thank the Sister Desiree, right? We love our Sister Desiree.
We love Desiree.
Absolutely. And so that was a portion of the Chicano Red Book, as Karena said, the Chicano Red Book. And we're going to continue to read more from this. There's so many, literary gems in here. Just real briefly, I got to read about the crypto Trotskyism.
Please.
I have to. So let me read the definition of crypto Trotskyism from the Chicano Red Book, also known as Chicano Power and the Struggle for Aztlan. Crypto Trotskyism. Definition: term used to refer to organizations that exhibit Trotskyist tendencies, but which don't admit to being Trotskyist. Most significantly, they suffer from the same great nation chauvinism as the other Trots, overemphasizing the role of the oppressor nation working classes and underemphasizing the role of the liberation struggles of the oppressed nations. And so that's crypto Trots. They don't say they're Trots, but their behavior and actions make them Trots. So that's. But yeah.
And can you give an example of some people who run in communist or socialist circles that would be exhibiting this kind of behavior?
Absolutely.
I mean, we don't have to name them. We can generally describe what their line is.
Well, in my opinion, I think, RCP USA is definitely crypto Trots. Revolutionary Communist Party USA, RCP USA, their idea of organizing within the United Snakes, organizing here in the Snakes is that, organizing in the factories and the unions. The problem is the majority of this population in the Snakes is white, the white oppressor nation. And so any entity that we look at, because the majority of the population is white, that means that the majority of the unions are white, and especially the leaderships of the unions, majority white. And so basically when people talk about organizing the focus on the unions, they're basically saying focus on the white nation. Because they're the majority of the population here in the U.S. So even when you talk about the quote-unquote working class in the U.S., because there's many different working classes. There's the Chicano working class, there's the black working class, there's, the white working class. But some people like to, bunch everybody together, the working class of the U.S. The problem with that is the majority of the population of the U.S. is white. Therefore, if we're talking about one working class, we're talking a majority white working class. So the white working class is not a revolutionary vehicle at this time. They just are not, and their, white supremacy has, sunken roots so deeply in the Snakes that everybody's affected by it, including all those that derive from the white nation. And so when we talk about the white working class, organizing within the white working class today, at a time when the white nation is not a revolutionary vehicle today, all you're doing is strengthening white supremacy within these false U.S. borders, and as I said before many times, real white allies will be the first to say, don't trust the white nation. They will be the first to say, our job, our roles as allies, living in the imperialist center of the world, our role is to take a back seat to any kind of leadership in any organization on these occupied states, in this occupied land. And so their role should be to take a back seat. They have no say so. All they should do is assist national liberation struggles on these shores, and work every day to undermine the white nation. That should be their role. And once they stray away from that, they no longer become allies. And that's why it's very important to understand political line, and not just your own political line. I'm being taught by this maestro and he teaches me about, this. Well, and I'm not learning about that because I'm not into that. So I'm not going to learn about Trotskyism because I'm not a Trot. It's very important, and there was a time when, I should even add that some organizations, especially the RCP USA, since we're on the topic, there was a time when they forbid their members from reading, certain, even Trotsky. There was a time when they forbid their members from reading Trotsky. And that's why I call them crypto Trotskyists, because they are Trots. They just don't, either they don't know it or they just are ashamed to admit it. And that's very important though, because if you're in a political party and you're not allowed to read, or organization, I should say, and you're not allowed to read somebody like Trotsky, even though Trotsky practiced enemy politics, how are you ever going to know if you're a Trot or your organization are crypto Trots? How would you know that? You would only know it by studying. So Mao said that we have to study, in order to understand any phenomenon. We have to study and understand its essence, and that means we have to study and understand everything in its realm, everything that it affects, everything that it influences, and everything that influences it, in order to fully understand any phenomenon in society. So how are we going to understand Trotskyism if members are not allowed to read it, or any kind of ideology for that matter? How can we say, don't be studying this, don't be studying this book or that book or what have you? Why would you say that when, how would you understand you disagree with it without studying it and making your points? Mm-hmm. And another thing, just because you disagree with a particular theorist or particular author or what have you, doesn't mean that their work is moot. Doesn't mean that their work is no good, because I like to quote Mim a lot as well. And Mim said that 2 + 2 is 4, no matter who says it. Doesn't matter who says it. If somebody writes something that's correct, doesn't matter who wrote it. If it's correct, it's correct. And this is like, it reminds me of, online and social media, and you got people like, why are you posting that? That was created by this group, and they're from the alt-right or what have you, right? And it's like, these weirdos, they're always saying stuff like this, but again, 2 + 2 is 4, no matter who says it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if a group or particular ideology created something. if what it says is true, it is true. You can't take that away. Otherwise, then you're falling to dogmatism and what have you. Like, we can't see nothing that was written by, like, we have to understand that, truth is truth.
Yeah, and we talked about in last week a little bit in our discussion about Mao on contradictions among the people. We talked about how Mao says that it's not it's the struggle is a necessary thing because that is actually how you win ideas. And so winning ideas and is obviously important, right? Because you can't forcibly coerce people to adopt certain ideas. That doesn't work, right? That's not going to work. It shouldn't work or shouldn't be done, I should say.
Unless you're a cultural group with some weirdos in the leadership, but that's a whole nother conversation. That's another. But anyway, so
winning ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah. The battle in the realm of ideas. I love that. So that's it. So do you have any last words for the viewers, for listeners?
No, I don't think I do. I would encourage everyone to join us back at the same. I think we'll be back at our regularly scheduled time next week, right?
Actually, I believe on the 6th.
Oh, on the 6th.
On the 6th, yeah. Yeah. So, So with that being said, I want to thank you all tuning in, and stay tuned. Next week, we're going to have, I believe the Chicano, is it the Chicano bikers are going to be on next week? I believe
no, that's in April.
Okay. Well,
I mean, that's the third week.
Oh, the third week.
Oh, it's coming up.
Okay. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, so I won't do that. And so with that being said, we want to thank you all for tuning in again to Free Aztlan, and we will see you next week, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. With that being said, O Mateo.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.